Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to keep you caught up on all things hip hop, music, and culture that happened throughout the week. Big shout out to the supporters, past and present, of this very podcast over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. You see their names scrolling at the bottom. Shout out to them. If you would like to learn more about how you could support, there are free memberships as well. And there's tiers just as low as $2 a month or whatever. But you get a lot of extra content, and that extra content has happened throughout the time I've been doing this, but also I got some more in store for y'all. Get input on the show as well. So visit that link in the description of this episode. And probably one of the biggest initiatives for Hip Hop Now podcast right now, we are trying to get to 500 subscribers on YouTube. Now, I've had a YouTube channel for a while. It wasn't strictly hip hop for a while. It was like hip hop, and sometimes I would stream some video games and stuff like that. It was kind of like my play space. But in the year 2023, 50 years of hip hop, I decided to go full throttle with this being a hip hop podcast YouTube channel with all kinds of content related to hip hop, honestly, from reviews of shows like Wu-Tang American Saga, eventually reoccurring live streams. Just had to find out, what's the best time and when y'all want to pull up and we could talk hip hop. And the live stream will be like just a loose conversation with people, right? Like whatever y'all want to talk about. Y'all want to talk about a new album. Y'all want to talk about old albums. Y'all want to talk about who's the best, what's trending on social media, why Benzino crying like that, whatever. It would be dope to do that. And I'm thinking about maybe a Fridays kind of thing. Or who knows, maybe a Sunday, right before the work week hits, you sit there, you chop it up, then you go about your business. So we shall see with that. But if you like the content you see here, subscribe to the channel. We are currently close to 400. I think we had 390 subscribers. So if we can get to 400, we can get to 500. And the best thing you can do is share the podcast, if you like it, with people on your timeline on social media, because that is the best way to expose other hip hop heads to content that you like, as well as hitting that like button so YouTube don't bury me when people looking for me. You feel me? Big shout out to hiphopdx.com, allhiphop.com, and browser for heads in a couple of places where I'm getting some of these stories from. Let's get right into the business. It feels like new music is ramping up, right? We've had a couple of albums drop, projects drop, some of which is, put it this way, I'm not trying to jinx it, but last year it felt really slow once we got to like June, which was like the halfway point to say, what are the best albums of the year so far. Now, if 2024 ended today and I had to pick a top 5, I think I have one. Now, we know there's an entire year and a bunch of stuff probably going to drop. So there'll probably be a lot to choose from. But right now, it feels like there's a couple of joints. And I think some people are sleeping, right? And I'll tell y'all a couple of joints. Like Shay Noir got a dope EP that I've been bumping. Hus Kingpin and Ninth Wonder got a dope album I've been pumping. You know what I'm saying? Master Ace and Marco Polo have a dope album that I've been listening to. So there's a couple of joints now that are like really worthy of your rotation, but we'll get into that later. But there are teases of other things happening. For example, Action Bronson. He recently, and let me pull up the article real quick and be professional about it. He recently kind of gave an update on his new album. He's been quiet for a while, lost some weight. He looked good, you know what I'm saying? Because he was really overweight, which is good. Uh, but also, and let me just get the tweet because he tweeted the following: finishing up new album, Johann Sebastian Bach Lava the Doctor. What the hell kind of okay. It's hard to not rap when I was blessed with the art. I'm back again and again. I feel him, right? As long as you have the appetite to create as an artist, if you're a true artist, you'll never stop. At some point, you'll just never stop. In some capacity, you will never stop doing what you do because it's just in you, right? If you stop, there must be some traumatic situation that makes you despise the art and you don't want to go back to it. And I don't mean even releasing it. I mean, I know people who, have music that we would probably never hear because they were just in there creating, you know. They don't want to release it or put it out. I don't know why, but just put it out and let it do what it do. But nevertheless, I feel him on that. My thing with Action Bronson, right? I have a complicated history with Action Bronson. Most like day one Action Bronson fans talk about I think it's Blue Chips mixtape, and they loved them ever since then. And for me, at that time, that's when I first heard him. I was like, nah, this dude sound way too much like Ghostface for me, right? Back then, just way too much. And I dismissed it instantly because I'm a hip hop head from back in the days, and certain rules is just like you can't help the way your voice sounds, but certain things is just like there's a time where you wouldn't have been out. You wouldn't have came out because no one would have signed you in hip hop because they would have said, yo, he sounds exactly like Ghostface. Dudes like Russell Simmons, let's just take it back there for a while and not talk about the other stuff. Uh, would dismiss you. Might even think what you're doing is biting, even though you can't help. You kind of sound like him when you rap. But obviously the influence is there. Even when he had the situation with Ghostface back in the days, which was kind of, if you ask me, him being tired of the conversation around him sounding like Ghostface, but being asked the question on national TV and responding the way he did, and then Papa Wu pulling up at Sean Price's funeral on him, and then Ghostface making one of the best diss records of all time. That wasn't even a diss record; it was just a video of Ghostface talking in the camera, and it was dope. It was one of the greatest things ever. It was the most Ghostface thing ever. It was dope. But there was a point in time, probably right before that, where I really liked Action Bronson a lot. Like he had this one mixtape. I can't even remember half the stuff, but he had this one mixtape that came out. It was like an EP style joint where I was like, kind of feeling this joint. I listened to it in the gym and I could hear the nuances that separated him from Ghost. So I was like, oh, I could hear what's unique about him, even though on the surface he'll strike you as someone who sounds like Ghostface. And then he put out that one album, which is hands down my favorite from him, Mr. Wonderful. And I think what I liked about that album so much was the production choices, because it gave it a feel that I think was unique to him. And I always felt like, and not to say that it wasn't done, but I don't think it was done ever again in that same way, because it was a lot of like psychedelic classic rock sample kind of joints and it sound dope. especially the way he was rhyming, like songs like Acting Crazy. Like it was, I loved it. Um, but then after that, the other albums that he released, none of them really stuck with me like that. And I know he was kind of like dealing with some things, and what he's doing now, what I just said, probably happened before every album. I'm back, bars, blah, blah, blah. And I just always felt underwhelmed. And maybe because I just liked Mr. Wonderful so much that I felt like that was his pocket. That was his square that he could own. Sure, you can't sample 60s, 70s rock, psychedelic stuff for the rest of your career. But, teaming with the right producer, which I assume, mostly will be Alchemist, you could kind of do that. But it wasn't just the beats on his later projects. It also was his pen game. I think on Mr. Wonderful, his personality was at 120. I think the whole sounding like Ghostface thing coming to a head with the woo took a little wind out of his sails. Now, don't get me wrong. There's times I heard a verse here and there where I was like, yeah, I want my hand action Bronson again. I'm hoping that's how much I like Mr. Wonderful. I'm hoping he can get back to that confidence level, given the fact that he's lost some weight. And he looked good. He lost the weight. He looked good. If you know what it's like to gain some serious weight, and even it could be serious for you. Like for me, I've never really been like obese, but I've been too big for my height, right? I'm 5'9". I've been too big for my height at times. And when you drop 50, even 60 pounds, which I've done before, it's no better feeling in the world than liking the way you look, liking the way you feel, and that energy going out into everything you do. So I'm hoping musically, the first time I press play on something, I'm like, yeah, that's it. We back. So we'll see. Speaking of teases for albums, if you've been under a hip hop rock somewhere, J. Cole will, I assume this year, will be dropping his album, The Fall Off. I think it's his 7th studio album. J. Cole doesn't have a ton of albums like Drake. Drake has a lot of albums, a lot of projects. I mean, but he also has a lot of mixtapes. So you got to put it all together. But he had announced this joint, and this was supposed to be like his last, album before he does whatever, play soccer. I don't know. But everybody's anticipating it, right? Because his last album was really dope. It was probably the most lyrically, well, I won't say lyrically focused. It was probably the one album that you could point to from J. Cole to say, yo, on that album, he was just about bars, period. Like, if, he got other albums that have concepts and songs and catchy hooks, and most of them are dope. But his last album was really about like bars, if you ask me. And just like the lead up to previous albums, whether they were the same content or not, J. Cole has dropped a teaser called Might Delete Later with a video that's kind of like, people said it's like an ode to the whole DVD era, if you know what that's about, the DVD era of hip hop. A lot of dope stuff, a lot of underground stuff happened in the DVD era. But if you are a wrestling fan, or you at least remember wrestling from the late 90s, early 2000s, it reminded me a lot of NWO, their promos with the black and white grunge kind of look and stuff like that. Like just a throwback to the 90s. And all of that was the 90s, right? The DVD era started in the 90s, late 90s, so to speak, maybe even close to mid. But it really took off a little bit later. But when I tell y'all, this man is he's rapping in the best way he's ever rapped ever. And I don't understand how or why. And I think because there may be two things. There may be a level of doubt about him being the best of the three. That's Kendrick and Drake, right? Um, or and when I say that, I'm not just talking about bars, right? I'm talking about just when you look at the three and you look at, for most people, and we'll get into that a little bit later, success level, right? Well, when it comes to success level, Drake is at the top, and then it's Kendrick, and then it's J. Cole. And it's like, well, how do you separate these three? Well, musically, they're all three very different. But with Drake, he kind of has his lane, and every now and again, he has some bars for y'all, those scary hours or whatever. Same thing with Kendrick. Kendrick might give you a song or two where he remind you he's still K-Dot, right? But no real commitment to just being nice with it. And J. Cole, that is his lane. I'ma be the dude that y'all gonna say, yo, he's just nice. He's probably the best lyricist out the crew, right? And I think when you look at it now, especially the fact that Kendrick does more conceptual music than anything, because let's keep it a buck. Kendrick had like a flat top fade when when he was like about bars, and BT Cypher and TDE. Since then, he's become more of an artiste, right, with the music. And Drake, he's more hip hop, right? Not hip hop, but hip hop. He does both. He does hip hop, but he kind of makes a lot of songs that are pop records, to be real. And everybody loves J. Cole because of bars. And Might Delete Later is no different. It's the only thing I'm afraid of, y'all. He's done this in the past where he's dropped. Now, he didn't do it with the last album. Last album kind of fulfilled the promise. But he'll drop like a teaser or a freestyle or a song that's like boom bap, bars, crazy, all of that. It's a lead up to the album. And then when the album comes out, usually none of the music, except for maybe one or two tracks, are anything like that freestyle, right? And to me, I get it, but I didn't always like it because you gave us a boom bap kind of album with bars. You gave us a bars album already, so I get it. But I kind of feel like don't get people hyped up to anticipate an album that really doesn't include that sound like that. Because that's why you get albums like, what's that one album, For Your Eyes Only, where I didn't think it was a bad album, to be honest. I just thought that the anticipation coming off his previous classic, 2014 Forest Hill Drive, set a standard that, oh, he back to give you some more of this. Oh, wait a minute, they fold and close, right? I took it for what it was. That's what I like about J. Cole. He just kind of makes his music is thoughtful, and he'll just make whatever he think should happen. And some people feel like he should do other things. And I think that was the case as far as people's like disappointment in that particular album. I get the feeling based off of what he's done with his previous album, how he's killed like every feature he's been on, from Drake's album to Benny the Butcher's album, and now this freestyle. I can't even see a future for this album not containing a lot on the bar side of things, right? So we'll see, because J. Cole, if I'm looking at this correctly, ever since Forest Hills Drive, he's kind of like dipped his toe in conceptual albums. Like For Your Eyes Only was clearly like conceptual, right? It might have been about relationships, not heavy, not Drake style. But it may have had a heavy tone of relationship music, but I thought that was fine, right? Even the other joint, what is it, KOD? which I really liked. A lot of people didn't like it because they wanted J. Cole. And I always call it mixtape J. Cole because Might Delete Later is clearly mixtape J. Cole. Some people just want him to do that. But I like his concepts. I like them because they're never just done to say, yeah, you know how some of these rappers and artists be here. So, one day I was looking at the moon and I figured, like, maybe I make a song about each crater on the moon or where the moon lands in the sky. Like, dog, relax. Nobody want to hear that, boss, uh, because it's just too much. So I'm almost anticipating some form of concept, considering what he just gave us. Because to be honest, as dope as that last J. Cole album was, I forget what it was called, like Comeback Season or something like that. I don't want that again because I feel like it was really aggressive and dark and angry. And I feel like J. Cole can do a couple of different things. Now, I don't want the Gloria Stefan singing hook J. Cole either. I think that's who's hooked straight up now. No, Paul Abdul. I don't want him doing that no more. But I don't think he does because he haven't done it in a while. So we'll see. I don't know what to think, honestly. This is dope, but I have to sit back and wait. And what makes it, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, what makes it difficult to feel comfortable in my anticipation of his album are the fans. Some of you J. Cole fans, and I'm a J. Cole fan, but some of you J. Cole stans are ridiculous. And if I read way too many of your tweets or your videos or hear you talk about this album at midnight and you haven't even heard all of it, it just sours the experience for me because I know it can't be as great as they're saying. Now, don't get me wrong, could, but chances are with most projects, you haven't even had enough time to digest what's being said, what's being presented on an album to call it a classic by morning. You just have it. You may like it a lot. Most classics are like that. It's rare that you hear an album and say to yourself, it's a classic. It's happened before. When I heard Get Rich or Die Trying, like I went to the record store back then, got the album. I think I popped the DVD in first, one or the other. When I heard that album and I heard each song, I already knew this is a special one. This is one of those albums where you like, this will be considered a classic. Now I know there's people who don't like it. I don't care. Maybe you wasn't around, but that album and 50 Cent, it was dominating radio, streets, whatever. It was dominating. And I wasn't even in NY when that dropped. I was in a whole other state and city, and it was still dominating like it was Queens. You know what I'm saying? So I'm hopeful. What do you think? Did you hear, first of all, did you hear the Might Delete Later teaser from J. Cole? Are you hyped for this album? Or are you kind of like me, like waiting to see what you're going to get? Leave your comments in the comment section below on YouTube. Also, you can hit me up on social media and we could talk about it as well. And lastly, so hiphopdx.com posted an article with Cormega, and he had some things to say that I feel have been talked about since the 90s, but it almost felt like a perfect time to double back and talk about it since the 90s was a long time ago, right? So again, the article is on hiphopdx.com. It says Cormega ponders when numbers replace skill in rap. Somehow the lines got blurred. Here's a quote from Cormega. The thing that made these albums special was they caught your attention before you even listened to it, and they all had no jewelry and cars, etc., as the focal point. Their vocals were the point. The beauty of us as a culture is the ability to make something out of nothing or to maximize the potential of what we had. Somehow the lines got blurred and numbers became more important than artistry. Excessive spending and bragging replaced the main thing rappers should brag about, which is skill. And he went on to like post a series of classic albums like or album covers on his Instagram, like Doggy Style and The Chronic, and album from Kanye and Nas. Cormega, you preaching to the choir, okay? you preaching to the choir, but I'm glad you're preaching because it's absolutely true as it relates to hip hop, specifically in the era that everybody loves, the era that everybody calls the golden age, even though I think the late 80s is the golden age. And I feel like the 90s is like a resurgence of hip hop, you know. Um, but he's right. Now, two things. One, to his point of, people not having jewelry and cars like that and the music being pure, I think that could be true for any up and coming artist because you just don't have the bread yet. I think some people look at these younger artists and be like, "Yo, look at all the money they got," but they made their money off of YouTube before they even got the main deal. So they doing it differently, right? They like, for example, right, Glorilla. I'm not really a fan, but if you look at the song uh, that got her popping on YouTube, it is very low budget. There's no wardrobe, probably no makeup besides the makeup they put on, but no one cared. They loved it. Now she could, now she got the jewelry, got her hair done, blah, blah, blah. She got the whole thing, but this is after her humble beginnings. And maybe that speaks to Cormega's point about, it being more pure at one point. But specifically talking about that time with the 90s, I think it's just as simple as rappers at one point weren't big sellers, right? They didn't have big record sales at all. They were just a chosen few, right? LL would go platinum, Run DMC would do their thing. It was like a chosen few really had dope record sales. EPMD, I always used to wonder when I was younger, like, why they always talking about going gold and all of that? And I didn't realize like how big of a deal that was for hip hop at the time because not everybody was achieving that. And I'm talking about some of our legends in the game weren't selling that much. Their singles would do crazy on the radio and stuff like that, but they weren't gold and plat. Some of them weren't even gold artists, But I think in the 90s, and as much as people like to talk about it, that whole Death Row Bad Boy era brought money to the game. And Nas Illmatic did not sell, but Doggy Style did, right? So it was almost like the old era of hip hop artists. Like you could be very dope, right? Illmatic is like, you would think Illmatic was diamond the way people talk about it, but it went platinum just a couple years ago. Literally, just a couple years ago. And back then you felt like, well, that's what happens. Snoop is a bigger artist. He's the one that's gonna go platinum. Nas isn't as big, but people love him on the same level, right? But then that Bad Boy and Death Row era just took off, especially once Tupac came home and joined Death Row, and cats had more money, and that's why the era of people talking about money got so big, because it wasn't just like the shiny suit era. It was that there were just more rappers eating on a level that was only exclusive to people like LL Cool J and Run DMC previously, right? So now more people were able to eat. Now the compromise was like, you put on that shiny suit. You had to make club records. You had to have some kind of club record in order to get in on some of this, right? And most artists did. Nas flipped a lot of his style and music to be more appealing to crowds who were listening to, the club Death Row records and the club Bad Boy records, right? He wanted to be in that mix, and he eventually got in that mix. And I feel personally at that time it was the best of both worlds with some of these artists, because hip hop comes from partying and dancing. So let's not be anti that just because of the shiny suit era and you wanted the dirt bomb era to be king. The dirt bomb era was cool early 90s, right? I was with y'all, man. I had the fatigues and I was with it. But that was hip hop. It was different eras. But once people started getting money, you kind of went back to dances, but people started talking about the money more. And it became less like, for lack of a better term, grassroots rapping and more about status rapping. And it was fine because you still got like somebody like a DMX who was highly successful, but he wasn't like my Rollie, throw my Rollie in the sky. He wasn't doing all of that, but he was still successful. So it was dope. But like Big said, more money, more problems. And the more money hip hop got, the more diluted the art became, because it seemed like, well, when PE was talking Black Power or Nas was talking Project Hallways, everybody loved those albums. It was classics, but they didn't do numbers like when we got Life After Death and All Eyes on Me. So we need to do more of that stuff, right? Those hits, those types of artists, those big artists. And it just throughout time, it just stayed on the money thing kind of became, that's all you really gonna talk about. Like, when you're a rapper, let me hear some. Let me double back. When you're a rapper who wants a deal, let me hear some. Man, if you ain't like, my bathtub lift up, my walls do a 360. If you ain't talking like that, some people not really feeling you, right? On a grander scale, there's going to be people who love your music, whether you talk about the stuff or not. But the main thing is, it became important or more important because of the business. The business seeped into the lyrics, the production, the strategy of releasing artists, whether you are talented or not. And it became, if you would like to be bar king, book bag dude, do that over there. You're not getting on the radios. If you're DMX, not DMX rapper, but if you're a DMX type rapper today, chances are you're not getting the same look, because that was that time. And now it's really about, honestly, I feel like sometimes, is it even about catchy records? It's not even about that. Like the ringtone era, even though there's a lot of people who didn't like it, one thing I'll say about it, having catchy hooks and catchy songs have been a part of the record industry forever. So every song, I'm like, oh, it's a dance. I can see why people like that. Oh, it's a chant. I can see why people like that. But now it's not even that. Now it's like, say the same thing. It's almost like buzzwords, right? Like if you use AI, right, you can create whatever you want, honestly, just by typing in what you want. And then it'll just gather information and create it, right? Whether it's an image or video or a paragraph or whatever. That's what I feel about some of these new rappers today. It's the same thing for the ladies. There's just certain things you need to say and keep saying them on every song, on every hook, over and over again, because it's almost like these are the buzzworthy words, right? This is the SEO, right? This is SEO hip hop era, where it's not really about skill. It's about, if I say this word this many times combined with this word this many times, and I'm being real, like analytics is a big part of all of this. Um, then people will react because people like this. So it's not as simple as, well, people like when people talk about money and ladies talk about their vagina. No, it's about, such and such was very successful. And she said, da, 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 da. And when I look at her counterparts who do the same things and I look at all the numbers, do more of that. Include this. And it's just, and to wrap it up and to speak to Cormega's overall point, as fans of hip hop, and I'm not just talking of the 90s, but those who are coming up now and maybe somewhere in the, 2010s, maybe 2015 on, it's kind of become a measuring stick. And a lot of rappers in the 90s started that measuring stick, like you didn't do numbers, or like, like it became about the numbers. So Jay-Z said it. Men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. And it became like almost a law. If you are not successful, if you are not popular, you are not a dope artist. But the great thing about music and history is the fact that you have people who are around, who will remember a time, who are still out here doing it, who can show you this is what artistry is. Concepts, bars, thoughtful production, rollout, album cover, videos, promo, freestyles on different LA Leaguers, Funkmaster Flex. There's a way to work the system. And the good thing is, unfortunately, it doesn't always equate to sales, but the good thing is you have a lane where people love artists that could freestyle. Like, they're young cats who listen to all these, Glorillaz and all of them, right? All of them. But they love that Black Thought freestyle with Funkmaster Flex. So it's kind of like the game changes and you got to change with it. It's sad that it's not what it was once before, but there are artists who keep that essence that Cormega described alive. You just have to be a hip hop head and watch the hip hop wave, right? See where they at, see who people are talking about. And here's one last thing, because it's a very long episode for me. The best way for you as a true hip hop head to keep your eye on the quality music, and I'm talking to a person who's just like, man, I don't even know. I turn on the radio, I hear trash, I turn it off. None of my friends listen to hip hop like that anymore. I just have no way of keeping my eye on who might be dope and who to look out for. I think all you got to do on your phone, on your laptop or whatever, is Google best of list from the past couple of years and look at the albums that appear on most lists, right? And I don't mean, oh, well, I looked at Rolling Stones, I looked at Complex. You can, but also look at hip hop sites. Find the hip hop sites you never heard of, like some of those that I mentioned on the show, like Hip Hop DX. And once you like Google that and you see a pattern, you'll be able to navigate to those who are dope. You're gonna find at least one and be like, yo, I like this dude. This is more like I remember in the 90s. And then you can just go down the rabbit hole with his music and it'll lead you to similar artists. That's one thing I'll say for streaming services. Let's just say, like, man, yo, I ain't listened to hip hop in years, man. Wife, family, blah, blah, blah. Man, I miss Boom Bap. And you stumble across Conway the Machine. Well, on streaming services, once you done listen to all Conway and Griselda, you can look at the bottom, for example, on Apple Music, And there are suggested artists who are similar. And that's what I mean. There's a path to the hip hop you enjoy. What do y'all think? Do you even care whether a record sells or not? Does that qualify it as quality, right? Leave your comments in the comment section below on YouTube. I do respond. I do check them. We can chop it up. Also, follow me on social media. I'm on every social media platform for the most part at Vegas World INC. And if you prefer the audio version of the podcast because you don't always have time to sit down and watch on YouTube, well, this podcast is available on all podcasting platforms. Subscribe, like, share, and definitely comment because I want to know what you think. Until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.